What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today is August 2nd, and yes, I do have the camera back in the shot. I'm working on a new setup. It might change from here on out, but for now, this is what we're going with. And Bitcoin over the past day has been really not doing all too much. We saw an attempt at a bounce followed by a quick rejection back down, currently just above 29,100. And this is likely due to the stock market having fallen below its upward sloping trend line. This is the hourly chart, and you can see the S&P is at a nice uptrend line. And today we have actually fallen below it for the first time. And this is something that we actually discussed in the previous videos. I had a couple key videos recently. The last video was about Tom Lee's prediction, which is not really all that important or relevant. But the video I put out before that video goes through a couple early predictions that I made at the beginning of the year, and it talked about the S&P when we were sitting right here in January. It talked about the S&P hitting 4,500 before reversing back down, and we said in that video that Bitcoin would be at 30,000 before potentially following the stock market and reversing back down. So what's interesting is that Bitcoin is still maintaining its upward sloping trend line on the daily chart. The S&P, on the other hand, has actually fallen below on the daily chart. And this came after seeing bearish divergence here on the daily chart for the S&P, these higher highs, lower highs in relative strength, bearish divergence, and then we also fell below the S&P's upward sloping trend line on the daily. The daily RSI uptrend line for the S&P 500 is now broken. We are actually falling below that level. The S&P has also been following this distinct trend where we break the RSI uptrend line and we see a huge downtrend thereafter. And so since March of this year, the S&P has been building on this daily RSI uptrend line. We've had higher lows on the daily RSI all the way until when? Today. Today we have fallen, and that matched up, corresponded, lined up right with our trend line breakdown. So I posted this S&P chart in my Discord, and somebody mentioned that Apple and Amazon have earnings tomorrow. And it reminded me to mention something, and that is that, this is a technical breakdown for the S&P. And again, we know that there is at least some degree of correlation between Bitcoin and the stock market. When the S&P breaks these uptrend lines, we usually see some downside. It doesn't mean that we have to go straight down from here. There is definitely a possibility that we see good earnings reports and stuff like that, and we get major rebounds to new highs, but the formation of a local top, right? So this is not something about today, tomorrow, next week. Overall, it just means that the momentum is starting to slow down for the S&P. So of course, nothing is guaranteed, nothing is certain, but this does point to potentially the bearish momentum picking up for the stock market. And if that does actually occur, where we see continued downside, it may mean that Bitcoin would actually look to break down as well. That is a possibility that we discussed recently. We actually talked about that in that video, which I'll post the link somewhere. The other part of that general prediction was that we were going to basically have a bull market or an uptrend going into the Fed pausing, because markets are always forward looking, right? The markets are always in anticipation of events. And so the markets were forward looking into a Fed pause. And as we know, we're getting closer and closer now to that taking place. And contrary to what the crowd expects, the crowd thinks that once we pause, we just go straight to the moon. But in history, we know that that's not the case. A lot of times, the pause actually results in maybe some stagnation in price action, some sideways, but ultimately even downside. Actually, every time the Fed has pivoted, we've seen downside. Bitcoin's RSI on the daily has been putting in higher lows at the lowest lows, right? The most oversold levels have always shown slightly higher lows all the way through. So if Bitcoin's daily RSI breaks below about 36, that could signal that the price probably at the same time would be breaking below the trend line. Now, this is not something that I would see as being all too bad, the end of the world. I think just as we anticipated at the beginning of the year, Bitcoin seeing a little bit of downside in some sideways action before the halving takes place is likely, right? It's unlikely, in my opinion, that we just go straight to the moon. A lot of people are saying that, well, BlackRock ETF, Bitcoin's going to go straight to the moon. But if you guys remember, on this pump right here, we had the BlackRock ETF news. And even then, Bitcoin wasn't able to get above the high. Even with that news, that historic news that the largest asset manager globally is looking to get into Bitcoin, we still couldn't break out. So what is that all about, right? Why is that happening? Well, it does have something to do with the fact that whenever Bitcoin is in a bear market, most of the pumps are not as powerful as usual, and there's less interest generally. A lot of people just feel more comfortable investing in Bitcoin when they know for sure that we're going into a bull market, right? When people are super confident. This is why the altcoins are suffering right now. People are still just unsure. A lot of people are waiting for the Bitcoin halving. People now understand the Bitcoin halving and its implications. And also right now, the stock market breaking down, if it continues, is not going to fuel confidence. It's not going to fuel bullish speculation. So we will see. The area of interest going from taking your fibs from low to high is about 4,100 or just under 4,200 for the S&P. That is the 382 fib retrace from low to high. If the S&P does come down, seeing a test of this previous resistance, we had one touch, two touches, and then a major breakout there. This is an area of interest for sure. If the markets do come down, you could be looking for support at about 4,200 for the S&P. And for Bitcoin, that support range would likely line up somewhere around 23,800 before finding support. If you take fibs for Bitcoin from the low to the high, the 382 is coming in at 25,700, but we have a lot of historic price action sitting just above 23,800. So, that area, a lot of support and resistance in that range. And now if you take a look at these two charts, like Bitcoin and the S&P, these markets take a long time to play out. Bitcoin is not what it used to be. It doesn't move as quickly as it used to. That's something that has become very clear to me. So seeing a little bit of sideways action, a little bit of down, a little bit of sideways before we enter 2024 over here makes sense, right? And seeing the S&P pull back in this fashion, going sideways before gearing up for 2024, something along these lines is what I'm expecting right now. Of course, anything can change. And of course, one thing that I really want to make it clear is that Bitcoin has not yet fallen below the upward sloping trend line. So technically, despite my opinion, right, because I've been talking about my opinion, despite my opinion, it's still an uptrend, right? And so if Bitcoin holds this and continues up, well, we might be looking at an ascendant triangle, right? So I'm not really all too biased right now. I mean, I've been kind of hands off on the crypto market recently. It's been really boring, not much action. We've just been seeing a lot of news. I mean, we've been seeing the SEC asking Coinbase to halt all trading except Bitcoin. You guys see that? Basically, the Coinbase, Brian Armstrong said, they came back to us and said, we believe every asset other than Bitcoin is a security. And we said, well, how are you coming to that conclusion? Because that's not our interpretation of the law. And the SEC said, we're not going to explain it to you. You need to delist everything other than Bitcoin. So they're playing hardball. They're really just going after crypto. I think this has something to do with Gary Gensler sort of saving face because he was friends with SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. He was, working alongside FTX to create some regulatory framework. And they were obviously breaking the law in a variety of ways. And Gary Gensler was there the whole time. So he has to pretend to be, this straight cut, SEC official. But we all know that he's also a degenerate himself. And also, let's go to the news that we saw with Richard Hart. SEC sues Richard Hart with fraud allegations. And now that has, of course, caused the HEX price to go down tremendously. And people are upset about that. And also, we've seen rumors now coming out that the SEC is going to be targeting crypto influencers at some point. We saw this posted in May of this year as well. And now there's rumors being spread about that. So people are worried. So there's a lot of uncertainties, generally speaking, with crypto at the moment. I do think things are going to clear up. I do think that in the end we're going to win the fight. I mean, XRP winning that lawsuit was a huge plus for the industry, and that was a really good sign. So despite Bitcoin and the S&P maybe playing out some sort of downtrend, medium-term downtrend with some sideways action, I think leading into 2024, things are going to get very bullish again. It's just about the sort of medium term that I'm a little bit unsure about. I remember people got super bullish on the stock market up here. Remember, we were coming up and everyone said it's a bull market again. And then I released that video about my previous prediction saying that, this is making me very skeptical. Everyone's bullish again. And then what we saw was the S&P break the RSI uptrend line the next week. It's always good to be skeptical of the crowd. When everyone says we're back, that's the time to be a little bit cautious. We are starting to see a little bit of signals that we may see some downside in the overall markets, Bitcoin and the stock market. But I do think that we are going to catch some support at these lower levels, the 382 around 4,200. And that will allow Bitcoin to likely find support. But that is just my opinion right now. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Smash the like, subscribe, join Patreon if you want to support my work, get into my VIP chat. Check out all the links below, and I'll see you all in the next video.